Hey everyone, I'm Layla. I used to think loyalty, especially family loyalty, was like bedrock, solid, unbreakable. But then the very people I'd have walked through fire for handed me the matches and pointed me towards the flames. What unfolded after that? Well, it's a story about betrayal that cuts deep, but also about the quiet strength you find when you've got nothing left to lose except yourself. They fired me. And the bitterest part? They did it, they said, to save my own sister, Brooke. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. Right there in that sterile HR office, the three architects of my downfall stood there. Brooke, my own flesh and blood. My manager, who also happened to be our Uncle Arthur. And Ethan, the guy I'd called my best friend since high school. They actually smiled, these faint, almost pitying smiles, as they formally collected my ID badge. Like I was just some piece of office refuse they were finally clearing out. I didn't utter a single word. I just held their gaze, one by one, a tiny, almost imperceptible grin playing on my own lips, a secret I was nursing close. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly fathom in their little power play, was that they had just ceremoniously kicked their actual boss, the true owner of the entire company, right out the front door. If you've ever been profoundly underestimated, stabbed in the back by those you trusted, or just plain mocked for being the quiet one in the room, then buckle up, because this story, it's going to resonate deep in your bones. Just 6 months before that delightful little scene, I was Layla Mitchell, the unassuming tech support specialist. The one who magically fixed the perpetually jammed printers, untangled the network snafus, the one everyone sort of looked through, even when I was right there, literally keeping their digital world from collapsing. I was the ghost in the machine, the one they'd call in a panic and forget about once the crisis was averted. My sister Brooke, she got her foot in the door at Innovatech Solutions because of me. I didn't just recommend her. I practically hand-walked her through the interview process, coached her, shared my notes, got her hired. I trained her myself, showed her the ropes, genuinely thrilled to have her there with me. But the second she caught the eye of the CEO's son, a guy with more hair gel than brain cells, everything shifted. It was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, I wasn't invited to key meetings anymore. Important emails from my own team would mysteriously vanish into the digital ether, or land in my inbox days too late. Projects I poured my heart and soul into, projects I'd initiated, were abruptly reassigned, handed off to other teams with no explanation. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, each one a little sting of betrayal. Then came the knockout blow. A fabricated complaint, meticulously crafted, filed by Brooke. It claimed I'd misused confidential company data. The HR manager, a woman named Carol, who I later discovered was one of Brooke's old college buddies, handed me the termination letter. Her smile was pure plastic, stretched thin and unconvincing. "Layla, you understand," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's for the good of the company. It's not personal. Not personal." My own sister. She had just, with a stroke of a pen and a well-placed lie, tried to obliterate everything I'd painstakingly built. Or so they all thought. Because while they were all engrossed in their petty office politics, their ladder climbing and their backstabbing, I had been quietly, diligently building something far, far bigger. You see, 5 years prior, I'd started a silent venture. A shell company, born from a whisper of an idea and fueled by late nights and my knack for cybersecurity. I used my tech skills, the ones they so casually undervalued, to develop cutting-edge cybersecurity tools. That little shell company, Aegis Holdings, it began to grow, and then it started very discreetly to acquire shares in Innovatech Solutions. I kept every single transaction, every share purchase, buried deep under layers of proxies, holding companies, and innocuous business names. No one had a clue. Not Brooke, not Uncle Arthur, not Ethan. Not a soul. And just 1 week, 7 short days before they orchestrated my grand dismissal, I'd signed the final paperwork. Aegis Holdings officially and irrevocably owned 72% of Innovatech Solutions. But I kept my lips sealed. I wanted to see. I needed to know who would be the first to plunge the knife. And Brooke, bless her ambitious heart, she didn't disappoint. Right in the back, just as I'd suspected. So I walked out of that office building that afternoon, the contents of my desk in a flimsy cardboard box, playing the part of the disgraced, fired employee. I could feel their eyes on me, hear the hushed whispers, the snickers. Let them watch. Let them talk. I wasn't done. Oh, I was so far from done. 2 days. That's all it took. 2 days after they'd triumphantly shown me the door, they threw a massive party right there in the main office. A celebration, they called it, for new leadership and a brighter future. Brooke, my sister, waltzed in wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my last 2 months' salary, looking like she already owned the place. And Ethan, my ex-best friend, was right there beside her, a champagne flute in his hand, his laughter a little too loud, as if he hadn't just helped detonate my career. They were clinking glasses, toasting their success, chattering excitedly about all their grand new beginnings. But what they didn't know, as the cheap champagne flowed and the canapés circulated, was that I had already scheduled an emergency, all-hands-on-deck, mandatory board meeting for that very evening, under my full legal name, Layla Mitchell, principal shareholder of Aegis Holdings. At precisely 7:01 p.m., every senior executive's phone buzzed with an urgent notification. Emergency ownership review. Your attendance is non-negotiable. I could almost picture the scene. Brooke, probably mid-boast, would have frowned at her phone. Why is the board calling a meeting now? Without consulting me? She'd have demanded. Ethan, ever the sycophant, probably would have said something like, "Relax, Brooke. Maybe it's about officially announcing your promotion to CTO. You deserve it." She would have preened, her smile widening. That smile wasn't going to last much longer. The boardroom was heavy with a confused, expectant silence when I walked in. The air conditioning hummed, a counterpoint to the tension. Brooke's jaw literally dropped. I saw it. Her perfectly painted mouth fell open. Ethan's fancy crystal water glass nearly slipped from his suddenly slick hand. Uncle Arthur, our dear uncle, the interim CEO, squinted, his face clouding over. "Layla, what in the devil are you doing here?" He blustered, his voice a little too loud. I didn't say a word. I just calmly walked to the head of the massive mahogany table, the seat that had always been reserved for the CEO, and I took it. Then I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound document. I slid it across the polished surface to Mr. Henderson, the board's chief legal counsel. "These," I said, my voice even and clear, "are the official ownership documents for Innovatech Solutions. You might want to read the salient points out loud for everyone, Mr. Henderson, particularly the summary on page 1. He looked baffled, picking up the file with a frown. He flipped through the first few pages, his frown deepening. Then his eyes shot wide. I saw the exact moment the blood drained from his face. This can't be accurate," he stammered, looking up at me, then back at the papers as if willing them to change. "This document, these filings, they show that a holding company, Aegis Holdings, now possesses a controlling majority of shares in this firm. 72% to be exact." He paused, then turned his gaze directly to me, his voice hushed. "And according to these definitive records, Ms. Layla Mitchell, you are listed as the sole proprietor, the ultimate beneficial owner of Aegis Holdings." The room didn't just go silent. It felt like all the air, all the sound had been sucked into a black hole. Brooke finally found her voice, a shaky, incredulous whisper. "This is some kind of sick joke, right? She's just an IT tech. This is impossible." I looked directly at her, my expression unreadable. "Correction, Brooke," I said, my voice carrying easily in the stunned silence. "I was your IT tech. Now, I'm the reason your rather generous paycheck even exists." Everyone was frozen, utterly poleaxed. The other board members, the ones who barely knew my name before, started whispering frantically amongst themselves, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Uncle Arthur, his face now a mottled red, slammed his hand on the table. You manipulated us. You deceived us. You went behind our backs. He roared. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, my gaze unwavering. No, Uncle Arthur, I said, my voice soft but carrying an edge of steel. I simply played the same game you all taught me so well. The only difference is you never ever imagined that the loser IT girl you so readily dismissed could actually beat you at it. Brooke's face had gone from shock to a ghastly pale white. Ethan looked like he was about to be physically ill. He couldn't stop blinking, his eyes darting around the room as if seeking an escape route that didn't exist. Uncle Arthur just stood there, sputtering, looking utterly dumbfounded, like someone had pulled his plug. I just sat there, calmly letting the silence stretch, letting it do its work. Every tick of the expensive clock on the wall was a hammer blow, a reminder of their monumental miscalculation. They had, in their arrogance and their greed, handed absolute power to the one person they had tried so utterly to destroy. Finally, one of the older board members, a Mr. Davies, cleared his throat, his voice raspy. Ms. Mitchell. Layla, are you seriously telling us that you've been strategically acquiring controlling shares in this company behind the scenes all this time? I gave a slow, deliberate nod. 5 years, Mr. Davies. 5 years of silence. 5 years of keeping my head down, of meticulously planning. While all of you were busy mocking my contributions, overlooking my potential, and systematically pushing me aside, I was buying this company. One carefully acquired piece at a time. Brooke, finding a surge of desperate anger, slammed her own hand on the table, making the water glasses jump. This is insane. You were just a background person. A nobody. You barely had the nerve to speak up in departmental meetings. How could you possibly do all of this? I met her furious, disbelieving gaze heaten. Because Brooke, I said, my voice still quiet but laced with an undeniable authority. While you were so busy chasing titles, schmoozing, and playing your little office games, I was actually building an empire. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, after a hurried, whispered consultation with his assistant and a frantic check on his own tablet, finally looked up, his face grim. Everything appears to be entirely legal, valid, and, as far as I can ascertain, completely irreversible. Ms. Mitchell is, indeed, the new majority owner. And then I dropped the second bomb. I let a small, almost regretful smile touch my lips. I'm not here just to own the company, ladies and gentlemen, I announced, my voice resonating with newfound power. I'm here to make some long overdue changes. Effective immediately, the following executives are being removed from their positions due to gross unethical conduct, misappropriation of company resources, and actions detrimental to the company's integrity. I slid another, slimmer folder across the table. This one landed right in front of Uncle Arthur. Inside were printouts, damning emails, illicit transaction records, evidence of manipulated performance reports, and yes, the falsified complaint against me. Brooke's name was right there at the top of the list of implicated parties, clear as day. She snatched the folder, her hands trembling, and flipped through it with a growing sense of panic, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. You're only doing this because you're jealous. She finally shrieked, her voice cracking. Because I was getting ahead, and you couldn't stand it. No, Brooke, I said, standing up slowly, towering over them in a way I never had before. I'm doing this because you betrayed me, not just as a colleague but as your sister. And more importantly, I'm doing this because you, Ethan, and yes, even you, Uncle Arthur, have become significant liabilities to the future of my company. Ethan, finally finding his voice, jumped in, sweat beading on his forehead. Layla. Come on, Layla, we're friends. We've known each other for years. Don't do this, man, please. I turned my gaze to him, my voice now cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of any past affection. Friends, Ethan? Friends don't sell each other out for a shot at a corner office and a slightly bigger paycheck. You had a choice. You could have said no. You could have had some integrity. Instead, you eagerly joined their little posse." He wilted, saying nothing more, his face ashen. The board, faced with irrefutable proof of my ownership and the equally irrefutable evidence of misconduct, had no choice. My 72% ownership gave me absolute, undeniable voting power. Within minutes, resolutions were passed. They were out, stripped of their titles, their access, their undeserved authority. But I wasn't quite finished. I reached back into my briefcase and pulled out 3 crisp, sealed envelopes. I calmly walked around the table and handed one to Brooke, one to Ethan, and the last one to my dear Uncle Arthur. "Consider these your final paychecks," I said, my voice even. "Severance is included, though frankly, it's more than any of you deserve. You are all, as of this moment, officially and permanently out." Brooke's voice was a broken whisper. You can't just erase us like this." Tears were welling in her eyes now. Tears of rage and disbelief. I looked her dead in the eyes, any lingering familial sentiment extinguished by her treachery. "You fired me to protect your own ambitions, Brooke. You tried to erase me. I'm simply returning the favor with interest." I turned and walked out of that boardroom, every single pair of eyes burning into my back. But as I reached the heavy oak door, I paused, my hand on the cool brass handle. I turned back slightly, a faint, knowing smile playing on my lips. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, my voice light, almost casual. "That Alex Spence's Bait Company retreat next month? The one in Bali? Still happening. Just without any of you, of course. Enjoy your newfound free time." I thought that was it. I truly thought firing them, exposing their deceit, and taking my rightful place would be the end of the saga. Sweet, simple, and final. But oh man, I had absolutely no idea how far they were truly willing to go. How deep their desperation ran to try and destroy me. About 3 days later, the strange calls started. My private number, the one only a handful of people had. I'd answer, and there'd be nothing but dead air, just a faint, almost inaudible hiss on the other end before they'd hang up. Annoying, but I dismissed it. Then the emails began to flood my inbox. Anonymous threats, veiled and not so veiled. Ridiculous, trumped-up accusations of company fraud. Bizarre claims about my personal life. At first, I just deleted them, attributing it to the bitter, pathetic lashing out of the recently unemployed. Just noise, I told myself. But then it escalated. I came home late one evening to my condo, a place I'd always considered my sanctuary. The door was locked just as I'd left it. But as I walked into my living room, a chill snaked down my spine. My laptop, which I always left closed and password protected on my desk, was open. Files had clearly been accessed. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was physically disturbed. But the message was crystal clear. "We can get to you." My blood ran cold. I immediately checked the security footage from the small, discreet camera I had installed in my home office. And there it was. Someone, cloaked in a hoodie, moving with a chilling familiarity, had used my old Innovatech employee keycard to gain access to the building and then my unit. A keycard that should have been deactivated the moment I was terminated. A keycard that only 2 other people, besides myself, had ever possessed master access codes for within the old system logs. Brooke and Ethan. I knew with a certainty that settled like ice in my gut that they were behind it. But what I didn't grasp at that moment was the sheer, reckless desperation fueling their actions. I found out later, through a few discreet inquiries, that after I'd unceremoniously booted them from Innovatech, Brooke, ever the opportunist, had tried to immediately launch her own tech consulting firm. Her brilliant plan? To use the proprietary files and client lists she'd brazenly stolen from Innovatech before her departure. But when potential investors did their due diligence, a quick background check brought her very public, very messy firing and the associated ethical clouds to light. Suddenly, no one wanted to touch her. She was toxic, blacklisted before she even got off the ground. And Ethan? Oh, poor Ethan. He'd apparently gone crawling back to one of Innovateca's main competitors, practically begging for a job, any job. But somehow, mysteriously, every company he approached already seemed to know the sordid details of his betrayal and summary dismissal. They all thought I had leaked the information, smeared their names. But I hadn't said a single word to anyone outside that boardroom. Their own reputations, their own actions were imploding spectacularly, and in their twisted logic, they blamed me for every last bit of it. So they concocted one final desperate Hail Mary plan. A plan designed to not just embarrass me or discredit me, but to take me down completely, publicly, and ruinously. It all came to a head at Innovateca's annual shareholder meeting. My first one as the visible, acknowledged majority owner. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom of the downtown convention center was electric. Everything was going perfectly. My presentation was polished. The financial numbers were stellar. Profits had actually soared in the few short months since I'd taken the helm and streamlined operations. I was feeling good, confident. But just as I stepped onto the stage, adjusted the microphone, and prepared to deliver my keynote address, a voice, sharp and furious, cut through the expectant hush of the room. Layla Mitchell is a fraud. She stole this company. None of this is legitimate. And there she was, Brooke, striding down the center aisle, pushing past astonished attendees, a thick manila file clutched in her hand like a weapon. In the middle of hundreds of shareholders, board members, financial analysts, and members of the press, she marched right up to the edge of the stage. "This," she declared, her voice ringing with righteous indignation as she waved the file dramatically in the air. "This file contains irrefutable proof. Proof that Layla Mitchell's holding company, Aegis Holdings, was built using stolen software, illicit funds, and a network of fake shell companies. She doesn't own this firm legally. It's all a sham." The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpeting. Every single eye in that cavernous hall swiveled towards me. My heart hammered against my ribs. One misstep here, one flicker of doubt, and I could lose everything. My reputation, my company, every single thing I had fought tooth and nail to build and protect. The moderator, a seasoned financial journalist, looked flustered. He turned to me, his expression a mixture of shock and professional concern. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice amplified by the PA system, Do you have a response to these very serious allegations?" I took a slow, deliberate breath. I walked back to the podium, my expression calm, almost serene. Then I allowed a small, knowing smile to play on my lips. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and steady, resonating through the silent hall. "Yes, I do. In fact, I was rather hoping you'd show up today, Brooke. 'Cause you see, I brought something too." I reached under the podium and pulled out my own folder. Not a thick, messy one like hers, but a slim, organized one. Inside, neatly arranged, were recorded phone calls, crystal clear, transcripts of emails, and damning bank transfer records, all meticulously documenting how Brooke, in her desperation, had bribed a disgruntled former IT employee, a guy I'd had to let go for incompetence weeks earlier, to fabricate those damning documents she was waving around. I had known. Oh, I had known for weeks she was plotting something. I'd even let it happen. In fact, I'd facilitated it. Weeks ago, I'd had my security team plant a subtly mislabeled decoy file deep within our old server archives. A file specifically designed to look like a potential ownership vulnerability. A juicy piece of bait. And Brooke, blinded by her rage and her desperation, had swallowed it whole, hook, line, and sinker. I signaled to the AV technician. "If you could just play this short audio clip, please." Her voice, unmistakably Brooke's, filled the ballroom, sharp and conspiratorial. "If we leak this, it'll ruin her. It doesn't even matter if it's 100% real. By the time she manages to prove it's all fake, the damage to her reputation, to the stock, will be done. We just need to create enough doubt." Gasps rippled through the room. The moderator stood there, his mouth agape. I heard one of our major investors whisper, "Oh my God," his voice filled with dawning horror. I turned back to Brooke, whose face had gone from triumphant fury to a mask of utter ashen shock. Her irrefutable proof was now just a useless pile of paper in her trembling hands. "You know, Brooke," I said, my voice soft but carrying the weight of finality, "you were always so good at teaching me how to play dirty. I guess I just got better at it." Security, already alerted and waiting discreetly in the wings, moved in smoothly and escorted a now silent, utterly defeated Brooke from the ballroom. As the doors closed behind her, a spontaneous wave of applause erupted from the shareholders. I looked out at them, at the sea of faces, and when the applause died down, I spoke from the heart. "This company," I said, my voice ringing with conviction, "for too long was built on a foundation of silence, of looking the other way, of betrayal, and of petty politics. But from this day forward, I promise you, Innovatech Solutions will stand for something better. It will stand for integrity, for innovation, and for transparency." But just when I thought the games were finally truly over, that all the ghosts had been exorcised, a letter arrived at my office the very next morning. It was delivered by a special courier, not through the regular mail. The envelope was heavy, expensive cream-colored stock. There was no return address, just my name and the office address typed. And in the corner, a small gold embossed seal I hadn't seen in over a decade and a half. A seal that made my blood turn to ice. I opened it slowly, my fingers suddenly clumsy. Inside, nestled on a single folded sheet of equally expensive paper, was a handwritten note. Just a few lines in a familiar, elegant script. "We know who really funded Aegis Holdings in the very beginning. You're not the only ghost in this story, Layla. Let's meet. G." My heart didn't just stop. It felt like it shattered into a million pieces. There was only one person in the entire world who ever signed their notes, their emails, their anything with just that single arrogant initial. Julian Vance. My former business partner. The brilliant, volatile, charismatic man I had genuinely believed, for 15 long years, had died in a fiery car crash. But if Julian was alive, if he was back, that meant everything I had built, everything Aegis Holdings represented, wasn't just mine. The implications were staggering. You see, way back before Innovatech, before Aegis, when I was just starting out, Julian and I were the original architects of the core cybersecurity algorithms that formed the foundation of Aegis's success. We were nobodies then. Two broke, ambitious tech nerds full of ideas and ramen noodles, coding day and night out of a cramped, dusty storage unit we laughably called our office. He was undeniably brilliant, a visionary even. But he was also unstable, impatient, greedy, the kind of guy who always looked for the shortcut, the quick win, instead of building a solid, sustainable strategy. He'd wanted us to sell our nascent code, our baby, to a shadowy foreign investor, a group with more red flags than a bullfighting convention. I'd refused vehemently. We'd had a massive, explosive argument. And then just a week later, the news broke. The accident. His car, they said, had gone off a bridge into a deep ravine during a storm. No witnesses. The car was a wreck. A body was never definitively recovered, but everyone assumed the worst. I grieved. I moved on. I rebuilt meticulously, piece by piece, what I thought was my dream, my company, all alone. Or so I had believed. I followed the sparse instructions in the letter. An abandoned, crumbling train depot on the far forgotten edge of the city. Midnight. The air was cold, damp, smelling of decay and old, wet concrete. When I arrived, the place was earthed in shadows, the only sound the mournful sigh of the wind through broken window panes. And then he was there, stepping out from the deeper blackness of a boarded-up ticketing office. Same infuriating smirk. Same damn worn leather jacket. Looking like he hadn't aged a day, or vanished off the face of the earth for 15 years. "Long time no see, Layla," he said. His voice a low, familiar drawl that sent a shiver down my spine I hadn't felt in ages. Julian, I managed, my voice surprisingly steady. I thought you were dead. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Almost. Let's just say I took a very extended sabbatical. But watching you from a distance, take our little venture and turn it into this corporate behemoth all by yourself? That, my dear Layla, gave me a very compelling reason to come back from the dead. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a small metallic flash drive, and tossed it towards me. It clattered on the grimy concrete floor at my feet. What's this? I asked, not moving to pick it up. Proof, he said, that smirk widening. Proof that your entire precious Aegis Holdings, your shell company, was initially seed funded way back when through an offshore account I set up before my untimely departure. Which means, legally speaking, my clever girl, I still own 49% of everything. Aegis. Innovatech. All of it. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. That couldn't be possible. No, I said, shaking my head. You were gone. You signed over all your rights, your shares, everything before you disappeared. I have the paperwork. Ah yes, the paperwork, he interrupted, his grin positively predatory now. The signature on which, I'm afraid, was a rather amateurish forgery. Good try though. And now, Layla, I want in. Half the profits. Half the power. Or, I could just leak everything. The real story. The board, the media, your precious new investors. Everyone will know the truth. Your pristine reputation? Gone. Poof. It felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Again. I had just fought off my own family, exposed their betrayal, rebuilt my name and my company from the ashes of their deceit. And now, a ghost from my deepest past, a specter I thought long buried, had returned to stake a claim on half of my empire. An empire I had bled for. I stared at him, standing there in the gloom, so confident, so sure of himself. And then something inside me, something cold and hard and resolute, clicked into place. I smiled. A genuine, chilling smile. You didn't come back for power, Julian, I said softly. You came back because you're broke. And probably desperate. His arrogant grin faltered just for a second, but I saw it. You wouldn't have waited 15 long years, hiding in whatever rat hole you crawled into. If you were truly doing well, if you really had a legal claim, I continued, my voice gaining strength. You've got nothing, do you? That flash drive? It's a bluff. A last desperate gamble. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. You really want to bet your entire empire on that, Layla? I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my own jacket and pulled out a slim, unassuming data chip. No need to bet, Julian, I said, holding it up. Because I already knew you were alive. I've been discreetly tracking that old, supposedly untraceable offshore account you used to initially fund our little venture all those years ago. And guess what? I bought out the bank that held it 6 months ago. Lock, stock, and barrel. His eyes for the first time widened in genuine shock. The smirk was completely gone now. You used a dead man's account, thinking it was your ace in the hole, I went on, my voice like ice. And I, in turn, used your own resurrected ghost to legally and permanently bury you. Every transaction, every dormant claim, every potential loophole related to that account now belongs to me. You don't own 49% of anything, Julian. You don't own any percent. You're just what you've always been. A ghost with an overinflated ego. As if on cue, the oppressive darkness of the depot was suddenly shattered by the harsh, bright glare of high-intensity security lights flickering on all around us. And stepping out from the shadows, from behind derelict train cars and crumbling pillars, were not police, but my own private security team, along with my lead corporate attorney, Ms. Albright, looking formidable with a briefcase in her hand. Julian backed away, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning fury. You set me up. He snarled. No, Julian, I said, my voice quiet but firm, the exhaustion of it all finally settling in, but also a profound, deep sense of peace. I just finished the story. The one you tried to prematurely erase all those years ago. as he was calmly, professionally, and very firmly escorted away, protesting his innocence and making empty threats. I just stood there in the sudden bright silence of the empty depot, breathing deeply. The cold, damp air filled my lungs, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, it felt clean. I had no real family left to speak of, not in the traditional sense. And the friends from my old world? They were gone, casualties of betrayal or simply faded into memory. But in their place, I had something I hadn't realized I'd lost. I had peace. And honestly, that was proving to be absolutely priceless. Back in my actual office, the one with my nameplate rightfully on the door, I had a new frame hung on the wall later that week. It was simple, elegant. It just said they fired me. But I secretly owned the entire company they worked for. And just yesterday, I had a small, additional line engraved on a little brass plaque right underneath it. And when the ghosts of the past came knocking, I made sure they were permanently laid to rest. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about loud explosions or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes the most satisfying justice, the most profound redemption, isn't loud at all. Sometimes it's just quiet and permanent. Wow, that was a journey, wasn't it? It just goes to show you never really know what someone is capable of, especially when they're pushed to their absolute limit. Life has a funny way of teaching us who we really are. What did you think of how things turned out? Did Brooke and Julian get what they deserved? I'd love to hear your thoughts and similar experiences in the comments below. Sharing our stories is part of how we heal and grow, right? And hey, if you found yourself on the edge of your seat, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Your support, even through things like super thanks, truly helps us keep bringing these real-life journeys of resilience to you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.